Well, it is 12 noon on the dot here in central Iowa, and I just want to provide a warm welcome to all of our wonderful clients and guests that we have on the call today. We have a wonderful presentation for you with some really important information, and I'm grateful for our guest speaker, who I will introduce here in just a moment. But I wanted to take a minute before we started to, again, extend a welcome and also just let you know, typically during these webinars, we will spend some time on some office updates. We'll also provide a little bit of a market update. We have decided not to do that today just because the nature of the topic at hand is just so vital and so timely right now with what's going on in the world that we want to reserve as much time as possible to be able to dive fully into the topic. With that said, a lot of questions always arise when it comes to protecting yourselves online, protecting your cyber identity out there. We live so much of our lives online, as we'll hear our guest speaker talk about today, that questions come up. So please email those to us. We're happy to answer them at the end of the call. There's always lots of questions whenever we do our webinars, but obviously with this topic, probably more so than usual. So you can email those to info, I-N-F-O, at harvestpointwm.com. Just like it sounds, harvestpointwm as in wealth management.com, and we'll compile those throughout the call and be sure to include those at the end during our reserved Q&A portion. As we do with all of our client events and webinars, we know that giving back is important to you as clients. It's important to us as an organization. And so we have partnered with an organization founded by a local high school student called Tech Gift. We thought that was appropriate given our topic today. And high school student Kathir Kalyanaraman founded this organization to help restore devices and give them access to refugees, underserved students, and also other community members to help them out. So check him out at Tech Gift Foundation, and doing really important work. And we're proud of him being a younger, industrious student, but also has a heart for giving back and caring for others. As we talk about cyber threats, one thing we have noticed in the past couple of years is more instances of attempted fraud and scams and abuse upon our clients than at any other time in the history of our organization, cumulatively, really. And we don't have time for me to chronicle those all out today, but I would mention a couple. And as we go back to 2023, we had one instance where a wonderful couple of ours from down in Missouri called us. And long story short, it was a timeshare scam, and we were able to help save them over $82,000. One of the most elaborate schemes that we had seen so far. Just last year, we helped another client with an instance, and we're able to help him save over $200,000 simply just by contacting us, talking through the circumstances, and then, if needed, getting people like our guest speaker today involved for further discovery work to be done. But so many of the cases that go the other direction when money is lost, because certainly that does happen, unfortunately, and we have a number of those stories, those occur when no contact is made. We don't hear from the client until it's too late. They haven't contacted us to help think through whatever it might be that they are going through. So we would just strongly encourage you, if there's any doubt whatsoever, even if you don't think there's any doubt, contact us, talk through it with us. Even if it's not going to be an investment through our firm here, we might not be able to advise on it, of course, but we certainly will be able to give you our 2 cents or connect you with someone that might be able to do some deeper digging, because there are just way too many instances of this. People are getting taken advantage of. Fortunately, none of our clients have ever had any of their dollars in their investment accounts here with us accessed in an unauthorized fashion. So that's a great thing. But unfortunately, too many instances of turning over a credit card or writing a check or wiring money from their bank accounts have occurred. And we want to try to do our best to prevent that. So it's a big part of the reason that we're here today. The guest speaker that we have today, I want to give a formal introduction for. We sat in on one of the presentations that he did just for our office, more of an internal training just a few months ago. And my goodness, it was eye-opening. I had a page full of notes, and as did our other team members. We're going to ask him to come back for another event that we're doing this fall. I have actually reached out to him to have him consult just for me personally, individually with my family and household. So he comes highly recommended within the industry. He has a very diverse background. He is the CEO of Digital Protection and Privacy LLC, a company that provides digital protection services to clients of wealth managers throughout the United States and Canada. He has co-authored major white papers in the industry on cybersecurity and how it kind of relates with wealth management. And he was previously a managing director at Merrill Lynch and a vice president at Goldman Sachs. Interestingly, he served as a presidential appointee at a Bureau of the United States Treasury. He's a graduate of West Point and also the Stanford Graduate School of Business. So our guest speaker is Mark Hurley, and I do want to turn it over to Mark. Obviously, everything Mark presents today is for informational purposes only and educational purposes. Again, I can encourage you to consult with Mark or someone like him just as it pertains to your individual cyber situation. But without further ado, Mark, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today. You have a great organization. Appreciate the opportunity. As Tim touched on, you think about all the various risks that are out there in your life, and quite candidly, people don't realize the single greatest risk to their wealth today is not whether the markets go up or down, but it's cybercrime. Cybercrime is now bigger than the sale of illegal drugs worldwide. And as I'm going to talk about today, it goes beyond, though, just stealing your money. It also creates risk for your family, for your kids, your household, etc. And some of the stuff I'm going to cover today may be a little bit unnerving or scary, but relax. I'm going to show you how to protect yourself. It's not hard. It's not complicated. It requires a little bit of work, but if you do that, you'll be fine. A little background on my company. As Tim mentioned, we provide a cyber protection services for the families of wealth managers. We work with families across the U.S. and Canada, hundreds of wealth management firms, including 7 now of the largest aggregators. And it was designed by guys I went to West Point with who were either cyber warfare people in the military or FBI agents in the cyber area. You can only get the service through Tim's firm. We don't go directly. That's probably why you've never heard of us. And it's not very expensive. You can do everything we do yourself if you want to. We can probably do it quicker and cheaper. And at the end, if anyone's interested, I can give you some more information about our services. Now, what are we going to talk about today in today's class? We're going to educate you first on who these cyber criminals are, what specifically they're trying to get, and more importantly, where you're at risk. And then what are the specific steps you got to do to protect yourself, protect your money, and most importantly, protect your family. When you think about who the bad guys are, there's 2 primary groups. Now, one group are offshore operations. It has 2 subgroups, of which the first subgroup are criminal gangs that are effectively nation-state backed, or at least nation-state tolerated. In other words, if you went to downtown Beijing or Moscow, you would see people walking into office buildings every day wearing suits and ties, going to work like any other professional, and their job is to go in and steal money. They're part of criminal gangs that are run by people who by day are either cyber warfare people or intelligence officers for their country attacking Western institutions, and by night they moonlight and steal money. And as long as their interests do not conflict with the state, they can steal whatever they want. And they've been able to breach the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Defense, blockchain, the cloud. They breach anything. Now, the second subgroup within this first group of criminals are really misportrayed by Hollywood. Everyone thinks of hackers as some nerdy person in their mother's basement working on a computer. And the reality is these are extraordinarily sophisticated small criminal gangs who are some of the earliest users of artificial intelligence software. And they've automated their attacks, and they mind-numbingly effective in breaching people and stealing money. These gangs don't exist just outside the United States. There's also many, many of them within the United States. Now, what this first group is trying to do is to steal money. And what they're targeting, first and foremost, are custodial, brokerage, and bank accounts, because that's where most of the money is. They like non-bank finance, too, because it tends to have a fraction of the protections. And generally, if you're using some of the non-bank finance, it actually links into your bank accounts. They could use that as a way to get to it. But they also want to steal non-public personal information about you, information that's not easily accessible, because they can use that to steal your identity. Now, identity theft in the United States today is a 54 billion, that's with a B, annual industry. It's primarily used to steal people's credit, but it's increasingly being used to steal health insurance and tax returns and governmental benefits. Now, the starting point in protecting yourself and your family from this group of criminals is to understand where you're at risk. And there's been a tremendous amount of hype around identity theft. And while identity theft is really big, and the reason why you hear a lot about it is there's all these companies out there like LifeLock and Aura and Experian running ads constantly. That's not the risk that you should be probably most worried about. Clearly you don't want your identity stolen, but the reason why it's not the one you should really focus on is because if someone steals your credit by federal statute and federal regulation, it's the lenders on the hook unless you're maliciously involved. In other words, you're not going to have to write a check. Now, to be sure, it's an enormous pain in the you-know-what to get it fixed. But just because someone's stolen your identity, that on itself is not the real risk. And unfortunately, this has taken people's attention off of what is the real risk. And the real risk is that with everything else, you're taking 100% of the risk if cyber criminals are able to steal money and you're even only indirectly at fault. Like, for example, everyone thinks, well, my bank account has federal deposit insurance. So somebody goes in and steals money out of my account. If the bank doesn't make it whole, the government will. No, that's just not correct. Federal deposit insurance is only there if the bank fails. And if you read your banking account agreements, which very few people do, they're set up so that if you're even partially at fault, even indirectly at fault, they don't have to make you whole. For example, we've never had a client get breached who we've worked with and lose money, but we've had many, many people who've lost a lot of money show up on our doorstep. And there was a family in the Northeast last year that lost $360,000 out of a Chase account. Someone got into their email and used that to get to the passwords and steal the money. They went to Chase, and Chase said, read the agreement. And this is no different with anyone else, custodians, brokerages, etc. In fairness, these organizations, they spend a king's ransom on cybersecurity every year, and they still lose millions of dollars because most people have little to non-existent personal cybersecurity. Additionally, this is really unremarkable if you actually look at any other online commerce. Very few people read the agreements you have to assent to say set up an Amazon account or an eBay account, etc. But if you actually go read those agreements, the way they're set up, you are agreeing that the company could sue you, but you cannot sue the company. So a starting point for protecting your family and your wealth when you think about cyber is to recognize and accept that whenever you're online, you're doing anything that's financially or commercially rated, you are taking 100% of the risk. If something bad happens, there is no recourse. You are not getting your money back. Now, as cheery as that is, meet the second group of bad guys. And they're made up of burglars and predators. You may recognize the photo of the gentleman in the middle. He used to be the national spokesman for Subway. He's currently in federal prison. And these guys, what they target are your homes directly and indirectly and your children. And the statistics are kind of frightening if you look at how successful they've been. For example, a recent study found that about 4 out of 5 times when a house is burglarized, the criminals, the burglars, are actually going into the social media accounts of their victims that aren't properly protected. Now, what I mean by this is when you have a social media account, all that information is effectively in the public domain unless you've turned on a litany of privacy settings to prevent that from happening. And so the bad guys don't even have to hack into the account to get this information. And it's easy for them in about 5 or 6 different ways to figure out where you're at any time and also to scope out your house. And about 1 million homes a year are burglarized every year, and about 800,000 times they're using social media accounts to figure out who to hit and when to hit them. Title fraud is just out of control. The way to think of this is, let's say you have a vacation home, or even your main house. Someone goes into the county assessor's office and makes a filing, and they claim they bought the house. Now, it's fraudulent, but the county assessor has no way of knowing it's fraudulent, so they change the title. And then the criminals proceed to either borrow money against your house, rent it out, or sell it. The stalking, I'm sure everyone's familiar with how widespread this is. It's gotten so bad now that the FBI has a separate unit solely to deal with teenagers being stalked and blackmailed online. There was a story in the Journal the other day that talked about how horrible this has all become. All right, so how do you protect yourself? The good news, it's not hard. You got to get some information, and I'm going to do this class, and every year we'll do update classes. I have a different class I'll be teaching later this year on some other stuff that's come up. at this event that Tim's planned. You need some widely available but inexpensive technology, and you need to take a bunch of common sense steps. And I'm going to show you all this stuff in detail. But the starting point in protecting yourself is to understand the difference between cybersecurity and cyber privacy, and more importantly, that you cannot have one without the other. Now, cybersecurity is about keeping people out of your online accounts, using sophisticated passwords, multi-factor authentication, certain technologies. You just make it very complicated for people to get into your accounts and steal money. Cyber privacy is about limiting the non-public personal information about you that's online, and far, far more importantly, controlling who can access that information. And if I can breach your cyber privacy, I can breach your cybersecurity. Very easy to do, and I'll give you some examples as we go along. Let's talk a little about cybersecurity. Now, rule one, if you're connected to the internet, anyone who works in the cyberspace will tell you, at some point, you're going to get breached. What you have to accept, though, if you are going to be breached, you have to take steps so that if you are, the bad guys can't steal anything of value from you. And the way you do that is you use multiple protections, not just one. Think of it as you're building a fort. And rather than just having the walls in the fort, you're also going to have a moat. And maybe you throw some alligators in the moat and you got boiling oil. In other words, you make it more complicated. So even if they breach one part, they can't get past the other parts. And if you do enough of that, you very quickly become what the military calls a hardened target. And that the resources in order to get to you become so large and so complicated that you're just not worth their time. You become uneconomic. And they move on to somebody else. Now, these are the 7 most common ways you're likely to get breached today. Now, if I taught this class 12 months ago, there'd be 2 or 3 of these wouldn't be on here, just because this is how fast the bad guys are moving and evolving. But this is currently the 7 most common ways you're going to get hit. About 1 million times a week, passwords get compromised. And as I mentioned, that the criminals now have set up their computers with AI software, so they automatically, whenever the company has a data breach, like I'm sure everyone saw AT&T was breached last year, T-Mobile had a massive breach every other week, it seems, Uber, same way, Target had a big one many years ago. The bad guys go in and grab all that information, the user IDs, the passwords, the emails, all that stuff. They throw them into very sophisticated computers, and they using algorithms with AI, and they hit thousands of accounts at once. And they primarily want to hit your financial accounts, your telecom account, in other words, your cell phone account, and they want to hit your social media accounts. If they get into all 3, they can steal a lot of money from you. And right now, it's almost ridiculously easy for the bad guys because most people don't use sophisticated passwords. And this is a chart taken from a study done by a company called Hive. They do what are called simulated brute force attacks, which is a military term for saying we're going to use a computer and use some software to try to guess your password. And they found in this study, in the end of 2023, they for the first time ever used ChatGPT to try to guess passwords. And if you look at the chart and go down the left-hand column, you'll see that they found now that they can correctly guess any 8-digit alphanumeric password. This is uppercase, lowercase, symbols, numbers, etc., in less than 1 second. So if anyone on this call is using an 8-digit password, don't bother. They're not even going to downshift. They're just going to go right by it. Okay. If you're using a simple password, like an example they have here is, let's say you had a date that had 15 digits in it that you always remember. You think no one will ever guess a 15-digit number. It took them less than 2 seconds to correctly guess it. The only way to protect your online accounts is to use unique, in other words, you never use a password in any circumstances, randomly generated 20 to 25-digit alphanumeric passwords. If you don't do this, it's not a question whether they're going to breach your accounts. It's just a question of when. The second most common way people get breached is because they don't realize that when they buy a device like this from the store, the way it's set up is designed to take your information and export it to the people who sold you the device and or the people who provide you the software. And the reason is these companies take this information and sell it to advertisers and make a lot of money. Now, a byproduct of that is that your user ID and your password is being stored in about 5 places on your device. Now, you can prevent this, but you have to turn on about 60 settings on an Apple device, about 120 on a Windows device. But if you don't, and someone gets into your device, it's very, very easy for the bad guys to start looting your accounts. And I'll give you a couple of recent examples. The FBI arrested a gang of people that were doing what are called shoulder surfing attacks. You're at a bar or restaurant, you're not paying attention. You put your passcode in, you don't realize somebody's looking over your shoulder. And with the help of another gang member, they distract you and they steal the device. And in a matter of minutes, they can loot all of your accounts because your passwords are just sitting there. Another example, I was talking to an advisor on the West Coast recently, and he had a client who was down in Chile on vacation and was putting a passcode into his cell phone, and someone on a motorcycle come up and grabbed it. And within 30 minutes, his bank accounts have been completely emptied. Unless you turn these settings on, if someone gets into your device, everything you have can quickly be stolen. The third most common way people get breached is through their smart home technology, their home Wi-Fi. Now, it's great to have, a coffee pot that turns on, or a smart TV, or doorbell, that kind of stuff that's connected to your Wi-Fi. But understand, it creates a lot of risk for you. And I'm not discouraging going to these, but what you have to do is you have to set up in a way so they're secure. And the reason is because if the bad guys get in, what they'll do is they'll try to breach one piece of equipment, and if they can get in, they can sit and watch what everyone else is doing online and copy passwords. An example I shared with Tim and his team that we ran into a little more than a year ago was a senior executive at a large financial services company that was diligencing us at the time. Called us one morning, and literally he was working one minute, and the next minute he was locked out of his devices, all of his accounts, his home network, and they were in trying to take everything out of his personal accounts as well as go after his work accounts. And fortunately, we just happened to be on site, so our guys were able to freeze everything. It took us 9 days to get them up and running again. But what we figured out is someone had gone in through the doorbell and had spent 2 weeks, and again, it's all set up with computers, so it's automated, copying their passwords and user IDs for every single account and the network and for all their devices. And then they suddenly struck and locked them out. So how do you prevent something like this happening to you? Every piece of equipment that's connected to your home Wi-Fi has to be connected using a unique, randomly generated 20 to 25 digit alphanumeric password. Additionally, you never, ever use the family name on the home Wi-Fi. That's like putting a flashing neon sign, and make sure the code for the Wi-Fi is a unique, randomly generated 20 to 25 digit alphanumeric password. The third most common way people get breached, or fourth most common way they get breached, is through a thing called malware. And this is a fancy term for saying computer viruses. Every day, somewhere in the world, there's some bad guy running a new computer virus, and on our side, there's some good guys trying to make antivirus. And sometimes the good guys win, sometimes the bad guys win. And what this does is, if this gets into your device, it gets behind all your defenses, allows them to grab all your passwords, allows them to take control of your devices. They can even pose as you in different types of attacks. An example, recent way that, everyone's been told you never click on links like this in ads, these phony ads from eBay or these text messages, because if you do, you're just basically injecting these computer viruses into your device. But the bad guys have gotten quite sophisticated in how they do this, because people have figured out you aren't supposed to do this. So an example of the way people are getting attacked now is the bad guys will hack into one of your friends' email accounts. And then with a computer and AI, they'll very quickly read all their emails, and they'll identify who the people they send emails to. And then they'll send emails posing as your friend to you, and they'll have an attachment and say, hey, look, I just saw this thing. I thought you'd find it really interesting. And if you click on the attachment, your device gets infected, as does your email, and they can access everything. We saw a $2.5 million home closing get stolen this way recently because it allowed the bad guys to get in and change the wiring instructions. Additionally, there's a thing called Trojans. Now, you never, ever download an app onto your device unless, one, you absolutely need it, and number two, you are unconditionally certain that this is a legitimate organization and it's being provided by, a legitimate group. Because what the bad guys do now is they're making apps and they're putting malware into the apps. And if you download the device onto your app, it's like almost injecting malware into it. Additionally, if you ever leave your device unattended, it takes someone less than 30 seconds to put one of these apps on your device, download it, and you never know it. And all of a sudden, your information is being sent out. So how do you protect yourself? Well, number one, you only use apps you have to have. If you don't have to have it, don't use it. Number two, you only go and get them from the Apple site or the Google Play site. Although the bad guys have even managed to get some of these onto those sites. That's why you really want to limit the apps that you use. And you should also regularly check your device and make sure that there's nothing on there that you're not absolutely certain about. And lastly, never, ever, ever leave a device unattended for even 15 seconds. The other way people get breached regularly is they effectively give away their passwords because they use public Wi-Fi and they don't encrypt their online traffic. Now, you're at a hotel on vacation, you're at a coffee shop or a hotel, doing something and you need to access something. You have to realize that just like I mentioned on your home network, these are public networks. So anyone on the network can actually see and watch what you're doing on your devices. And next time you say go to a Starbucks, look around. You may see somebody sitting there all day, sipping coffee, working on a device, working on a computer. They're probably copying passwords. And there's an aftermarket where they can sell them. How do you protect yourself? You get a piece of software that's called a virtual private network, or VPN. I'll talk more about it later. But what it does is it automatically encrypts your online traffic. The sixth most common way people get breached is they're ever so foolish enough to plug in their device into either a public charging station, a rental car, the back of an airline seat, even a hotel with a USB charger, as opposed to using the power cord. Now, you could use those, but you have to use them in a way where you're protected. And the reason why you have to do that is if you plug into one of these places, two bad things are going to happen. Number one, there's a high likelihood a virus is going to be injected into your phone. In fact, most of the public charging stations are assembled in China, in case you're wondering. And number two, they almost all automatically download your information. And cyber criminals know how to grab that and steal that information and use that to attack your accounts. Now, how do you protect yourself if you want to use one of these things? You go to Target or you go to Walmart or Amazon, you buy this little device here. It costs about $2. I carry a bag of 10 of them wherever I go. And you plug this in first and you put your cord into the back of this. This is like a prophylactic. And what happens then is the only thing that comes in is electricity and none of your information goes out. Now, the seventh most common way that you're likely to breach, I wouldn't even have discussed 12 months ago. And in about a year, this has gone from a non-existing criminal tactic to one that generates about 40 billion in stealing every year for the criminals. And it's called vishing. And what they're going to do is they're going to call you and pose as either your bank, your custodian, or even your advisor. And it's very easy for them to spoof the caller ID. In other words, the caller ID that shows up is either your bank, your custodians, or your advisor. So you really think it's legitimate. And they're going to try to get you to do something urgent. They'll say something like, Tim's on an airplane right now and he just texted me and we think someone's in your account. We need you to open up right away. If you open up your account and let them look at it, every dollar in that account is going to be gone. Now, how do you protect yourself against this? You have to understand that no financial institution is ever going to do this. If they think there's a problem in your account, they're just going to lock it and let you get on an 800 number and spend 4 or 5 hours trying to get it reopened. They just stop the bleeding and let someone else sort it out. You're never going to get a call like this. But to give you a sense how slick these guys are, they'll understand a lot about you. They'll know a lot about your advisor or your bank. They'll be very authoritative. We had 2 clients get hit with these a few months ago. And even though we've trained them on never to do this, both of them told us they were just on the verge of opening their accounts when they remembered they should give us a call first. And that's what kept them from losing a lot of money. All right, let's talk a little about cyber privacy. As I mentioned, you can't have cybersecurity without cyber privacy. Now, the big problem that's created with cyber privacy is the fact that all this technology that's out there now that makes our lives so much easier, it has a business model that's built on collecting their customers' information and selling it to advertisers. For example, Meta, which has Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, they make about 60 billion, that's with a B, dollars a year collecting and selling customer information. Amazon makes more money collecting and selling information about clients than they do actually selling the client's products. Now, what they do, all these companies, they set up their technology so that the default settings, they automatically gather a tremendous amount of information from you. And what's problematic about this is cyber criminals have figured out how to access that same information and use it. And I'll show you several examples of how. Now, the companies, let's be clear, they don't want to get sued. So they give you the ability to opt out of it, but they make it very complicated. And what they do is they require you to turn on a litany of settings on your apps, your search engines, your browsers, and your devices. But if you don't turn on that information, it's very, very, very easy for the bad guys to come in, grab this info, and steal it from you. I mentioned identity theft, which is not the end of the world, but it's not great. It doesn't take a lot of information to steal your identity. The gentleman I don't know if anyone saw the movie Catch Me If You Can, Leonardo DiCaprio played a famous con man named Frank Abagnale, who now consults to the FBI. Abagnale says, look, if I know where you're born, I know your name, I know your birthday, I'm 98% of the way to stealing your identity. Well, let's say you have a Facebook or an Instagram account, and you haven't turned on all these protections as you can see the information, so they can see everything you're posting, what's going on in your daily life. They can figure out where you're at any time, and maybe even you have your birthday on it. Okay, I'm just telling you, if you're doing this and you're not taking these steps, it's not whether your identity is going to be stolen. It's going to be when. It's almost a certainty it's going to happen, and it's an enormous pain to get it fixed. Far, far worse is cyber criminals are now taking and using artificial intelligence software and becoming much more aggressive in attacks to steal large amounts of money. And what they will do is they will go into social media accounts that don't have the privacy settings on, and they will download videos, and they will clone the voices and images of the people they want to target. In fact, and it's very easy to do this. There's a site for $4.95 will let you clone anybody's voice, and it will defeat voice recognition software. There's even a YouTube video that will show you how to create one of these clones that you use on a Zoom call, and it's extraordinarily accurate. And I'll give you a couple examples of what we've seen just recently. An advisor on the East Coast was telling us that their client had an account which allowed them to use voice recognition instead of putting the password in. They thought that'd be much more convenient, and they hadn't protected their social media. And so the cyber criminals came in and downloaded a video of her, cloned her voice, and stole $2 million out of her retirement account. Another more recent incident, we got called in by a family in Arizona where they had a mother and a grown daughter, and both of them had not protected their accounts, turning all these settings on. And so the cyber criminals could figure out where the daughter was at any time, and they could also profile the family really well. And they went in and cloned the daughter's voice. The daughter had not put a sophisticated password on her telecom account, so the bad guys were able to go in and effectively divert the cell phone away from her phone to theirs. They texted the mother and said, "We have your daughter. We're going to take her to Mexico unless you wire us $200,000. The mother picked the phone up and called who she thought was the daughter. And in the background, she hears the daughter screaming for help. She then proceeds to go to a bank branch to wire $200,000 to a crypto account. The bank wouldn't let her do it. The criminals are on the line. They made her go to another branch, and she's then wired the money. Okay, this just happened a few weeks ago. Look, this is really scary stuff, but you have to understand, if you're not worried about cyber privacy, you don't have cybersecurity, and you're creating real risks for your families. And unfortunately, it gets worse. And again, I'm not trying to scare anybody. I'm just trying to emphasize why it's important to do this. As I mentioned, I can figure out when to rob your house very, very easily if you haven't turned these settings on. If you haven't turned them on, what a cyber criminal will do is they'll put a search query out online saying, "Let me know if this person shows up in a photo anywhere." And so let's say you're off on a trip with a bunch of friends and they take a group photo. You don't even post it in your account. They put it into their account. But if their account isn't protected, what will happen is you'll automatically be identified in that photo, because if you haven't turned all your settings, there are various apps that provide facial recognition capability and also tagging capability. So in other words, cybercriminal just puts a search out, your photo shows up, they see you're away from home, and they can come rob your house. This happened to a friend of mine's neighbor very, very recently. Even worse, and I know this is a little bit scary, but if you're a parent or grandparent, if you're not doing these steps, you're putting your kids and grandkids at risk. And this is what the FBI really worries about tremendously. The child predators regularly go into the parents' and grandparents' accounts and collect a lot of information and profile a child. And then they'll connect with the kid anonymously online in one of these chat rooms, and they'll pose as a peer of the kid. And over many months, they'll get the kid confident, comfortable, trusting them. And at some point, the kid will share something very personal, embarrassing. And then the predator will start blackmailing the kid. And about 10 to 15 months, 15 times a month, somewhere in the United States, a kid commits suicide over this. So look, I know it's scary, and I'll show you how to protect yourself. It's easy to do, but I just want to emphasize, you really got to do this, because it's much more than just protecting your money. This is about protecting your house, protecting your kids, protecting your grandkids, protecting yourself. Okay, so what do we got to do? As I said, it's not that hard. You need to use some widely available but inexpensive technology, and you got to take a bunch of steps. All right, let's talk about the technology. I mentioned earlier a virtual private network, or VPN. We recommend what's called Surfshark. It's a British Virgin Islands company. It's a very sophisticated provider of technology. It doesn't cost a lot, but you install this on your device, and what it does is every time you go online, it encrypts your traffic and it hides who you are. Great protection, particularly if you're ever using any kind of public Wi-Fi. Secondly, you need to have a password manager. Unless you're some sort of genius savant, no one's going to remember 300, 400, 500 accounts, each with unique randomly generated 20 to 25 digit alphanumeric passwords. We recommend Keeper. It's a software that you load onto your device. And then what you do is you put all your passwords and accounts in here, and it has the ability to generate these passwords for you. And you reset all your passwords. But once you got this done, your life gets really easy because all you have to remember is the passcode to get into the password manager. And then you click on the account, and about 80 to 90% of the time, it just autofills all the fields. And the 10% or so when it doesn't, you just push a button, copy the password, and paste it in. I jokingly told Tim and his team that we set my girlfriend up. She's a partner at EY, and she's informed me she's not sure she's keeping me, but she's definitely keeping the password manager because these things make your life so much easier once you're digitally organized. The third thing everybody needs to have is a private email. Now, this is going to sound a little counterintuitive, but this doesn't replace any of your existing emails. However, I can loot every one of your financial accounts by just getting into your email, because what I'll do is go to your bank account and click on the forgot password link. And then it sends right back to the email that I've breached a reset, and I can change your password and take your money out. How do you prevent this from happening from your custodial accounts, from any other financial account? When you look at those accounts, they'll have an option to have a separate recovery email. And what you do is you get a private email. It's a pay for service, typically costs like $10 a month. And you don't put your name on it, you just put your initials. And you use this solely for account recovery purposes in each of your accounts. So if someone manages to get into your regular email and starts clicking on forget password link, what it'll do is it'll send the reset, but it'll send it to this email account instead of your regular account. And you make sure when you set this email account, it's not like just sitting on your device that's easily accessible, that each time you have to go in and put the password and multi-factor authentication to access it. Makes it a little bit more burdensome to change passwords, but it eliminates this entire line of attack. Now, with this software, what you do is you upload it onto your devices, and then you go get all of your online accounts and you put them in the password manager, and you reset their passwords to unique, randomly generated 20, 25 digit alphanumeric passwords. And you do the same thing with your smart home technology, and you store them in the password manager. Now, it's vitally important that you write down the passcode to your password manager and you put it in a safe. Because if anything ever happens to you, it's going to be very hard for your family to get in these accounts without that password, because you'll be the only person who ever has that. Even the company that provides the software doesn't have access to that password. And then the third thing, which is really the heavy lift, is you got to turn all these settings on. As I mentioned, all told, there's about 900 settings you have to turn on. There's like 60 on an Apple device, 120 on Windows, and then you got to go through the search engines. Then you got to go through the browsers. And then you go through every one of the apps. And then you got to turn on multi-factor authentication. And again, you have to navigate through this and turn all the settings on. But if you do these steps, you quickly become a hardened target. You achieve what we call is basic cyber hygiene. Now understand, you can't skip any of these steps. You do all these steps or don't do any of them, because otherwise it's like building a fort and forgetting one of the walls. But if you do this, it's extraordinarily hard for the bad guys to get in and hit you. Now, understand too, though, that this is a process. It is not a solution. You're going to get new devices. You're going to get new accounts, new home smart home technology, and companies don't like it when you turn these settings on. So about once a year, they change them. So you have to have a way of continuously updating them. About once a year, you have to fully do the soup to nuts, front to back update. Now, we recommend after you get the basic cyber hygiene that you take some incremental steps, because likely everybody makes mistakes. And so what you want to have is an early warning system that's a fallback defense just in case you do make a mistake. And what happens is that most of the people who actually steal your passwords don't have the offshore operations to steal your money. So instead they sell them. And there's an aftermarket on part of the internet called the dark web. And there are companies that you can sign up for and pay for a service, which will let you know if your bank account number shows up for sale, or your custodial account number, or your credit card number. Now, understand, this doesn't mean you can skip those other steps. You get to that point, you've probably lost a material amount of money. But this prevents it from losing all your money, is why you'd sign up for a service like this. Additionally, the way you prevent title fraud is you need to go to your county assessor's office, wherever you have a property, and register for notifications in case someone makes a filing on your property. And most county assessor's offices will send you an email and a text letting you know if somebody makes a filing. And if someone makes a filing and you don't know anything about it, you should be on the phone a nanosecond later calling them saying, hey, this is not me, this is fraud. That's really the only way to stop title fraud. Additionally, once a year, at least, you should go and look at your credit reports. As I mentioned, there's a lot of hype about identity theft. And, these identity protection services, they're a lot like pregnancy tests. Whereas what I'm talking about is birth control. You're trying to prevent something from happening. Pregnancy tests only let you know what happened. That's what identity protection services largely are. At that point, you've lost a lot of money. You're just trying to fix a mess. Now, that said, it is important to go look at your credit at least once a year. But far more importantly, you should check to see if any of your underage children have credit reports. Because most identity theft is not of adults, it's of kids. Because they now get Social Security numbers as babies. So the parents can get a tax deduction. And cyber criminals have figured out, go steal the kid's identity. You can steal it 5 or 6 times, lots and lots of money, and before you even figure out what's going on. And we have a tape the FBI has given us that we use with teaching classes to kids, where a young lady got to Vanderbilt and found out she owed $1.5 million because her identity had been stolen 6 times as a kid. Now, she didn't have to pay that, but it took her 5 years to get her credit cleaned up. Additionally, look, if anything bad happens, the longer you wait to address it, the worse it gets. And it's like a geometric function. And there's not one thing that you should do. I've heard people say, oh, just freeze your credit, you'll be fine. Anyone tells you that, there's a term for that person. They're a moron. They don't know anything. The reality is that it's very case specific. We've never had anybody get breached and lose money that we've worked with. We've had lots of people who lost lots of money show up on our doorstep looking for help. And we've been to the passport office, we've been to the FBI, we've been to the FTC, we've even been to the Apple store, we've even been to the telecom company. It really is case specific, and you have to overcompensate every time that you do all of this in order to protect yourself. But if you do all this stuff, you'll be in pretty good shape. Now, I'm happy to start taking questions, but before I do that, I always like to anticipate the first question I'm going to get, which is, Mark, you started by telling us, that no matter what we do, we're still going to get breached. Now, explain to me again why should go all these headaches. And the best way to think about this is an old joke. There's 2 guys walking in the woods, and they stumble onto a bear. The bear gets up and gets ready to charge, and one guy sits down and starts putting on track shoes. And the guy turns to him and says, dude, even with track shoes, you can outrun a bear. And he goes, dude, I don't have to outrun the bear. I'm trying to slide. I just have to outrun you. That's what cybersecurity is about, okay, guys? If you can just get yourself a hardened target, the bad guys go find somebody else. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Wow. It's like kind of drinking from a fire hose there, Mark, with all that information. And thank you very much. Very informative. We have some questions compiled on our side, and I'll begin to dive into those. But just before I do, and so as to give some time for any additional questions, just checking what we have here, current status, please send those to info@harvestpointwm.com, and we'll include those in the list that we already have here. But I mentioned a case that we ran into from 2023, from 2024 last year. We're actually dealing with one right now where Mark has been kind enough to jump in right on the spot for someone in a matter of a couple hours and dive right in and do whatever he can to help. Unfortunately, some money has already been lost. Fortunately, we were able to help save the client from sending another $300,000 into what very likely is a scam. So if you think these are small instances and small dollar amounts, think again. Like Mark mentioned, the creativity of these scammers is getting more and more in depth, and so you have to be on guard. One of the questions that we had come in first, Mark, that we'll start with is Jan from Missouri asked, what's the best way to know if an app or a website is legitimate?
Very, very hard to do. And that's why I think the best way to protect yourself is to just only use things you absolutely, unconditionally have to have, and you've read reviews about them. But to give you a sense of what I mean, the cyber criminals are finding ways that if you go to a legitimate website, they will, for a period of time, can divert you to a copy of that website that's actually theirs. So one, you never download an app from a website. You just do not, period. That's just almost certain you're going to get malware. If you want to get an app, you go to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store to get it. Never have the website send you there. You just go directly in on your own, because they'll try to divert you what they say is the Apple site or the Google site, and it's not. They can create these fake things that look very realistic using AI software. Um, the key is more, less is more here. You want to only use stuff that you absolutely unconditionally have to have and get rid of the rest because it's just a high risk that it's going to be effective.
Our next question is from Karen here in Iowa, and she's wondering maybe some more tangible ways to protect children's online presence, and even while still being able to share with family and friends to keep them updated.
Yeah, look, social media is part of what we do now as a society. You have to do this to be able to stay in touch. What you have to do is go turn on the various privacy settings that I talked about here. If you go in and turn on all these privacy settings, there's about 80 on Meta, 119 on LinkedIn, about 37 on Amazon. That's just a lot you got to turn on. Then all the information in your account, the only people who see it are people that you approve. But if you don't do that and you don't regularly update those settings, because the companies don't like it because they can't now collect and sell your info, then everything you have is in the public domain. So this is a matter of deciding if you're going to use an app, you're going to go turn on all the settings. You also got to protect your devices, your search engines, and your browsers. When we think of cybersecurity, and I talk to people regularly about this, they all go, "Oh God, all these passwords, this is going to be really complicated." And I go, "That's actually that's not the complicated part. I mean, you have to do this, but you also got to do these settings because if not, the criminals can get in." And let me give you an example I shared with Tim and his team recently of how creative the bad guys have become. There was a family that was planning on buying an apartment in Paris. And they were talking to their advisor by email about this. Now, unfortunately, one of the family members on an earlier trip at JFK had plugged their phone into a public charging station and they got a virus in it. And that virus let the bad guys access their email. And again, this is all read by computers, automated. They quickly saw this transaction was coming up. And then what they did is they could see the family was getting ready to go to Paris in a few months. And they waited till the family left. And once they were in Paris, they changed the email on the password account. And they sent an email to the advisor saying, "Hey, we found the apartment we want. We need a couple $1 million. Here's a picture of the apartment." The advisor, who was a very good fiduciary, said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, that's a lot of money. We got to do a call." Now, the same family had not turned on all these privacy settings on their social media accounts. So the cyber criminals were able to go in and download videos and also profile the family. They could see what was going on a day-to-day basis. And with the videos, they were able to clone the voices of the family. Additionally, the family had not used a sophisticated password on their telecom account, and they went in and diverted the cell phone away from their phone to their phone, which no one could tell this was happening. So the advisor wound up doing a 45-minute call with who he thought was the client. And it was cyber criminals, and bye-bye $2 million. That's how sophisticated this has become, okay?
Would you advise just generally, Mark, anytime people get a text message, a phone call, an email from someone that they do not know, you pretty much just have to assume that it's a scam or a fraud attempt until proven otherwise?
Yes, flatly yes. I mean, even if you get an email from a friend and it doesn't seem at all right or send you an attachment, you should call the friend first to make sure it's legit because you can infect your thing. As I mentioned, we saw a family was buying a vacation home and someone got into their email account, took an attachment sent to them by their advisor, sent it back to the advisor with a question. The advisor opened it, didn't realize it infected the advisor, and then they used that to track the transaction. And just before closing, they changed 2 numbers in the wiring instruction. Bye-bye, $2.5 million. Happened in the Midwest. Okay, I mean, every day I could go on for hours on these stories. The key thing to keep in mind is they're getting more aggressive. Okay, they're figuring out that they can call you directly. They can steal your device at a restaurant or bar. They won't hesitate to do that. They also are, they have what we call the trifecta. If I can get into your cell phone, if I can get into your social media accounts, then I can get into your financial accounts. Okay, that's why you've got to turn these settings on. Otherwise, you're just exposing yourself.
Okay, we've got one from Jim in Iowa, and he's asking about the password manager itself on your device. If the device gets hacked, can the criminals access the password manager and then steal all the other passwords?
Now, what it is you have to put a passcode in separately for the password manager. Now, to be sure, it can be burdensome at times. So like we set our clients up, What we do is oftentimes put facial recognition technology on it so that only your face will open it up too, or you can put the passcode in. And then you have to keep in mind these password manager software is like military grade encryption. Very, very hard for the bad guys to get into. Now, the flip side of your question, though, which is a very good question, is if you haven't turned on all those privacy settings, all the settings I'm talking about on your device, the 60 settings for an Apple device and 120 for a Windows device, if you're using a password manager, the password for the password manager is just sitting there. So you first have to make the device secure, and then you put the password manager on there, and you have a unique, lengthy password for that, and that's what keeps where you store all your stuff. Never use, for example, the Google password manager, the Apple password. Those things are just like a laugh. It's a joke for the bad guys to get into. Apple keychain, just way too easy.
Another question from Mike here in Iowa. You had mentioned kind of your services, and Mike was wondering, obviously, a company like yours, Mark, there's a lot of trust that your clients are placing in you to help with this particular realm. A lot of important personal information. What assurances kind of do you provide? What protections or safeguards are in place for ensuring that no data gets breached in that regard?
Great question. Great question. All right, let me share our services real quickly. I'll share what we do, and then I'll walk you through how we protect you. We do all the stuff we're talking about here. We charge $35 a month. It covers up to 3 devices. If you have more than 3 devices, for $5 more a month, we'll throw in 3 more. Most families pay us either $35 or $40 a month. You pay us the first year's fee up front because we're going to do a lot of work to get you set up. And after that, it's quarterly in advance. And what we do is we will provide you all the software. We buy it in bulk and provide it as part of our service. It's all inclusive. We come in on a Zoom appointment, and we'll set up your password manager. We will reset all your passwords, do the same with your smart home technology. All the settings on your devices, your apps, your search engines, and browsers. And the way our technology is set up that we can never see, access, or copy any passwords. And the only time we can access your device is during the appointment. Additionally, we record the appointment. We're happy to give you a copy of it. We use it for our own protection. We have a separate group that independently reviews, make sure everything was done correctly as part of the setup process. And we can get a family typically set up, it's depending how many accounts you have. We were in a family the other day, had 1,100 accounts. It took us a while there, but typically it takes 1 appointment, maybe 2 if you've got a lot of accounts. And we come in, we get you entirely set up. We teach you how to do this. While we're teaching you, it takes you about 45 minutes of your time because we just have people working on the devices. But keep in mind, all we're doing is turning on existing settings that are already there to protect you. We're not changing stuff. We're not, you're not giving up your privacy. Additionally, we protect your anonymity by using a private email for your accounts with the password manager and Surfshark. In other words, just your initials show up, so they don't even know who you are. And we never have access to your password manager, any of your passwords at any time. Now, after we get you set up, then what we're going to do is put in the second layer of protection. And we will collect some information from you that we will track on the dark web in case somebody has made a mistake and you've been breached. But we're very paranoid people. So the way we collect your information, we make it so that even if we're breached, it's unusable. Like, for example, we'll collect incomplete information. Like, I want your credit card, but I don't want your 3 digits. I don't want your expiration date. Just give me your bank account number. Just give me your custodial account number, and which on its own is useless to use it for criminals. And that we keep it offline in a secure facility, alarms and cameras. We go on in random intervals through a dark web search company called Dark Owl, which the Israelis use. It's very good. But again, we don't have access to any of your non-public personal information. We get partial information for you to track. We also will go and help you register your properties for notifications of title fraud. The notification will be sent to you. We'll show you how to activate it. We once a year we'll do an appointment with you and pull down your credit reports and review them with you, and then check to see if your kids have credit reports. And if there's a problem, we work with people every day helping them fix. People lose money, call us every day, so we're very good at helping fix stuff. Again, we've never had anybody get breached and lose money. The only time we had anything ever show up on the dark web is when Fidelity got breached last August and didn't disclose it until October. And only then, about 8 or 9 of our clients across the U.S. and Canada got hit. We do ongoing classes, and then we will regularly and systematically update what we're doing. Every step of our process designed to protect your privacy. I can't, like, once I've got you set up, you have to set up an appointment with me if you want me to do something for you. I can't see into your devices. I can't see any information. It's solely at your level. And we're using off-the-shelf technology. In other words, it's not our technology. We're using widely used technology that's independently vetted, uh, and most importantly, it's very easy to use. The average age of our client is about 70. So it's a service for everybody, but it's not necessarily just for technophiles. We work with people who quite candidly aren't that comfortable with technology, as well as ones who are.
I would just say, obviously, as I mentioned at the beginning, you need to evaluate for yourself whether or not you want to be a client of Mark's, and whether or not that makes sense. Go through his process, get a better understanding, do your own due diligence. Certainly, we can't endorse or make any warranties or representations about his work. However, I would say this. One of the aspects that really stood out to me about Mark was his invitation. Like I said, I've been through previous presentations with Mark. His invitation to contact him if somebody gets in a situation where they don't know what to do and they might think it's a scam. And I was initially a bit skeptical. I figured, you'd probably have to be a client of Mark's, but he actually delivered on that in this most recent instance, and I'm sure he would in the future if we ever called him. So very, very appreciative of that. I'm sure that invitation extends out to all of our clients. So we're very grateful to partner with Mark just to be able to bring you this information on the presentation today. And like I said, do your own due diligence, see if it might make sense to take that next step with Mark, or as he said, implement these safeguards yourself. You're able to do that. You're able to go and get these types of technology. The one thing we did want to follow up on the private email, just quick clarification point on that one. The purpose of the private email again, Mark, and maybe how that
great question. Or doesn't replace any of your existing emails. It's solely used for account recovery purposes on your financial account. So if you go to your financial account, you have a regular email that's associated with the account, but you have the ability to put a different email for account recovery. In other words, if someone tries to change the password, that's what you're using this email. But you got to make sure it's a pay for service, because otherwise it's one of these free things. With AI, they can quickly figure out what it is to get around it. Number two, it's anonymous. You don't put your name on it. You just put your initials on it. And it's not easily accessible on your device. Additionally, if anybody wants more information about us, we have set up a landing page solely for Tim's firm, and they have a brochure I think they'll be providing you that has the same landing page. You just click on here. What we'll do is you'll get a text message with a calendar link, and you can schedule an appointment. One of my partners is happy to walk through this. Our service is customized to each family, so we'll ask you some questions. You can ask us any questions you want. Sometimes it takes 10 minutes, sometimes it takes an hour. Happy to explain what we do. It may not be for everybody, but to be sure, you got to take these steps to protect yourself, because if you don't, all we're talking about is, it's just a question of time till something bad's going to happen, unfortunately.
When you said click on this link, red flags and sirens started going off in my head, Mark. That means you're training us well. I knew right away, but we know this one's safe. We vetted this link. It's a good one to go to. But take Mark up on that if you want to learn a little bit more about his services. Today's presentation has been recorded on our end, and we're going to send that out as a follow-up email. So if you're like me and you want to kind of break this up into more bite-sized pieces or hone in on one aspect of it, please feel free to do that when we send out the recording. Also, as Mark mentioned, you'll receive a brochure with more information about his services. We're happy to have a conversation about how this might apply for your situation. Again, our heart in the matter with this particular topic is really twofold. One, protect you as the client. That's the overall theme of our business, quite frankly, and something you've charged us with doing as best as we possibly can. And then number two, it is to keep you informed and talk about things that are of interest to you. We've sent out surveys over the past couple of years, and cybersecurity is always one of the top responses that we get back. So we wanted to deliver on that. Hopefully we did today with Mark's help to get you the information that you need. There'll be another survey that comes out after this particular presentation. And so please take some time to fill that out. Tell us what's at the top of your mind. Give us some thoughts about how we could have done better today. We are always trying to grow and improve as we serve you. But with that said, we will end the webinar today right at just about 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for all of your time and attention today, and we'll look forward to continuing the conversation with you in the future. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.